She knew before she opened the door. There was something in the quality of the knock. 3 measured strikes, unhurried, the knock of a person who had traveled a long way and was not in a hurry because the destination had already been reached. Vera Callum set down the shirt she was folding, placed it on the stack of clean laundry on the bed, and stood still for a moment in the small bedroom of the small house she had rented 8 months ago under a name that was almost hers, and she thought, "He came before I thought he would." She was 8.5 months pregnant, which meant every movement required planning, and she planned the movement to the front door with the specific awareness of her own body that had become her primary occupation over the last weeks, watching for signs and thresholds and limits she had not known her body had before. She opened the door. Caden Cole was standing on the front step with snow on the shoulders of his coat, and the particular quality of stillness that she associated with him specifically, the stillness of a man who had stopped moving because he had arrived, and not because he was uncertain. It was dark beyond him, the particular dark of a small town in the week before the new year, when even the streetlights looked cold. She looked at him and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment that was long enough to contain everything they had not said in 8 months. His eyes went to her stomach, and she watched the sequence in his face. Recognition, then something that was not calculation but was close to it, and then the something else, the thing that was not any of those, the thing she had been afraid to see, and also, if she was being honest with herself in the way she had been trying to be honest with herself for 8 months, the thing she had been afraid would not be there.
"Come in."
Not because she had decided to say it, but because the alternative was standing in an open doorway in December at 8.5 months, and her body had opinions about that. He came in. She closed the door. The house was small in a way that a person like him would register, furnished in the specific style of rental properties in small towns, adequate and impersonal, and she had made it slightly more hers over 8 months, through small modifications, a throw on the sofa, books on the shelf, a plant on the kitchen windowsill that she had been surprised to find herself tending with care. He looked around the way he looked at spaces, assessing and filing, and then he looked back at her. He took off his coat, and she could tell he was looking for somewhere to put it and had not found the obvious place, and she took it from him because that was easier than watching him locate the hook by the door, and she hung it up and turned around and he was still looking at her.
"Tell me why."
Not a demand. The 2 words had the quality of something that had been waiting a long time to be said and was finally being permitted its voice. He said it quietly, and she heard in the quietness not the suppression of anger but the thing that came after anger had run its course.
"Sit down."
He sat in the chair nearest the window, not on the sofa, which she noted as characteristic, the choice of the chair that faced the room rather than the chair that faced the television, the choice of a person who preferred to see what was happening around them. She went to the kitchen. She filled the kettle because filling the kettle was the thing she did when she needed her hands to be busy, and she had learned that about herself in 8 months of being alone with her own patterns, all the things she did that she had not known she did until there was no one else to absorb her attention. The kettle clicked on. She stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the window over the sink, which showed her the dark side yard and the neighbor's fence, and she thought, I am going to have to say it, all of it. She had rehearsed this conversation many times over 8 months, not because she expected it to happen, or because she intended to return and have it, but because it was the conversation her mind kept returning to in the small hours, the conversation that kept asking to be had in the space where sleep should have been. She had rehearsed several versions of it, and none of them had begun with her in a rental house at 8.5 months, making tea, while the person she owed the conversation to sat in the chair by the window in the coat she had just hung up. She made 2 cups. She carried them carefully, the way she carried everything carefully now, with the full awareness of her own center of gravity, and she set one in front of him and sat on the sofa across from him with the other. She looked at him. He was watching her with the patience of someone who had been patient for 8 months and had not run out of it yet, and she thought, I should tell him the beginning, not the end, not the decision but the thing before the decision, the thing that had made the decision feel like the only available option.
There was a phone call.
She said it and stopped, Because saying the beginning was the hardest part, because the beginning was where the story that had seemed so clear at the time had to be told to someone who was going to know it was not the full story from the moment she finished, and she had to say it anyway. And she would. She looked at the tea in her hands. She looked up at him.
6 weeks before I found out I was pregnant, I heard a call you were on. In the office, when I had come back for something I had forgotten. The door was open a little.
He was very still.
I heard enough to understand something I thought I needed to know.
What did you think you needed to know?
Where I stood.
He held her gaze.
And what did you conclude?
That the standing was about to change.
And you did not ask me?
No.
Why not?
She looked at him and said the thing she had not said to anyone in 8 months, the thing that was truest and therefore hardest.
Because the answer would have hurt less if I was the one who left first.
The quiet after the call had a different quality from the quiet before it. The before quiet had been the quiet of two people waiting to know something. The after quiet was the quiet of two people who now knew and were deciding what to do with the knowing. Vera looked at the phone on the table between them, at the small rectangle of glass that had just contained Marcus Cole's voice and had returned to being an ordinary object, and she thought about the specific economy of understanding, how much a person could hear correctly and still arrive at the wrong place, how the wrong place could feel so much like the right place that 8 months could pass in it without resolution.
I heard exactly what I expected to hear.
Caden looked at her.
I am not saying that to excuse the misunderstanding. I am saying it because it is the true thing. I walked into that office already prepared to find evidence of what I feared, and when I heard the words, I did not hear them as they were. I heard them as the thing I had been waiting for.
How long have you been waiting for it?
In general, 30 years, approximately. With you specifically, since about month 4, when things started to feel real enough that the possibility of losing them became something I could not stop thinking about.
You were waiting for me to leave you from month 4.
Not every day, but it was a possibility I was tracking. The way you track weather when you are planning something outdoors. Not because you expect rain, but because you need to know what to do if it comes.
And when it seemed like it was coming,
I implemented the contingency I had always had.
which was to leave first.
Which was to leave first, yes.
He looked at the window behind her, at the dark December yard, and she watched his face with the specific attention she had been paying to faces since she was 7 years old, the attention she had developed as a survival skill and had not managed to put down in the years since. What she saw on his face was not what she had seen on the faces of people who had left in the past, which was a kind of determined neutrality, the face of someone implementing a decision already made. What she saw was the face of someone encountering the dimensions of a problem and finding them larger than expected.
I should have told you what I was planning.
Yes,
I thought the surprise was the point.
I know.
Why didn't that work for you?
Because for someone who has been waiting for people to leave, surprise is not the word for what happens when the situation changes suddenly. Surprise is what happens when good things arrive unexpectedly. What I experience when situations change without warning is something closer to confirmation.
You heard the words and they confirmed what you feared.
They confirmed what I had been preparing for. There is a difference. I was not afraid in that moment. I was certain. And certainty, even wrong certainty, feels very much like being right.
That is a precise thing to understand about yourself.
8 months is a long time to sit with one mistake. You learn the shape of it eventually.
He was quiet again, the real quiet, and she thought about what he had said in the kitchen on their first night, which now felt far enough away that she could look back at it as a completed thing. He had said he was not telling her the truth of the call to correct her, but to give her the information she should have had. She had heard that as a gracious thing and had let it stand as gracious. But sitting in it now, she understood it was also an accurate thing. She had not had enough information. She had made the best decision available to her from what she had. The decision had been wrong not because she was wrong to make it, but because the information it was based on was incomplete, and the information was incomplete not because she had failed, but because neither of them had yet learned to speak clearly enough about the things that mattered most.
I need to ask you something.
Ask it.
When I left, in the first days, what did you do?
I looked for you.
And when you found where I was?
How do you know I found where you were before now?
Because you came here knowing which house was mine. You did not ring the neighbor's doorbell first.
Fair.
He was quiet for a moment, and then he said,
I found where you were in the 5th week. A friend of yours who did not know she was telling me.
And you did not come.
No,
Why not?
because I did not know what I would be coming to do. I was angry for the first 2 weeks, and I knew that angry was not what you needed and was not what I should be showing up with. And after the anger, I was not sure anymore what the right thing to do was, which has not been an experience I am accustomed to.
You did not know what to do next.
For the first time in a very long time, no.
She sat with this, with the image of him in the 5 weeks after she left, not knowing what to do next, and she thought about how that image would have changed things if she had known it at the time, and she thought about how she had not known it because she had been elsewhere assuming she had been correct, and she thought about the specific cruelty of certainty, how it closed the door on exactly the information that might have changed it.
Were you angry at me?
Yes.
Are you still?
No.
What changed it?
Understanding that you were not wrong to leave. You were wrong about what you left because of. But leaving, as an action, given what you believed you had heard, that was not an unreasonable thing to do.
Most people would say I should have asked first.
Most people have not been waiting for someone to leave for 30 years. You did what your experience had prepared you to do. I did not give you a reason to do anything else.
You could not have known I needed a reason.
I knew you were careful with trust. I knew it, and I did not account for it. I planned a surprise for someone who needed information more than she needed a surprise, and I am the one who should have known the difference.
She looked at him across the small table in the small house in the small town and thought, he has spent 8 months understanding the shape of his part in this, and that is not nothing, and it is not enough, but it is something real to build from.
I am glad you came before the baby.
I was not going to let you do the last weeks alone.
You could not have known I was alone.
I knew enough about how you operate to know you were not going to ask anyone for help.
That is accurate.
It is one of the things I should have paid more attention to earlier.
We are both very good at not paying attention to the things we should.
Yes,
That is probably the beginning of the conversation rather than the end of it.
I agree.
Then we should have the rest of it.
Yes.
And outside the window, the snow that had been on his coat when he arrived was still falling somewhere further on, and the house was warm, and the tea was cold, and neither of them moved to change any of those things. He did not leave that night. She did not ask him to stay, and she did not ask him to go, which was a kind of permission that was also a kind of honesty, and he seemed to understand it as such, because he took the blanket she set on the arm of the sofa and said nothing further about logistics, and she went to bed and lay in the dark and thought, he is in the next room. The thought had the quality of all thoughts that were simultaneously simple and enormous, the kind that contained more than their words could hold. She lay in the dark for a long time before she slept, and when she slept in the specific way she had learned to sleep over 8 months, on her side with a pillow for support, a routine she had developed alone, and that had become automatic. In the morning he was in the kitchen before her, which she had not expected, and he had found the coffee, which she kept in the cabinet above the machine because that was where it made sense to her, and he had made it in the correct ratio because he had watched her make coffee enough times to know, and she stood in the kitchen doorway in the pale early light and looked at him, standing at the counter, and thought, this is what normal looks like for other people. She had spent 2 years in close proximity to him, and had spent 8 months being aware of what his absence felt like. But this was different from both of those things. This was him in her space, in the small rental house in the small town, making coffee in her kitchen at what she estimated was 7 in the morning, and it was ordinary in a way that their life together had not often been, and the ordinariness of it was what caught in her chest.
Sleep all right.
Well enough.
She sat at the table and he brought her a cup without being asked, which was a small thing and also not a small thing, and sat across from her. They were quiet for a while in the morning way, the quiet that was not avoidance, but acclamation.
What did you do in the 15 weeks between finding where I was and coming here?
I had someone make sure you were safe and well. I had someone make sure the house was sound and the neighborhood was what it appeared to be. And I sat with the question of whether coming would make things better or worse for you.
That is a very restrained thing to do.
I was not always certain it was the right thing. There were several weeks where I concluded that coming was the right answer and then reconsidered.
What reconsidered you?
The belief that you had made a decision and that showing up to reverse the effects of your decision was not the same as having the conversation that should have happened before you made it.
But you came.
I came because you are 8.5 months pregnant, and I was not going to not be here for the last weeks, whatever happens after them.
Whatever happens after them.
I did not come to tell you what happens next. I came because this needed to be addressed before the baby arrives, and because I was not willing to be the person who was absent for this part.
She held her coffee and thought about what he had said, the careful architecture of it, the specific choice, not to make promises beyond what he was doing, and not to diminish what he was doing by attaching too many conditions to it.
Tell me what the 8 months were like for you.
Starting from the beginning, or from after the anger.
From after the anger.
It was the first time in a long time that I understood what it felt like to want to reach someone and not be able to.
Not able to or not choosing to.
Both. At different times, both.
He held his cup and said,
In the 3rd month I almost came. I had the address written down. I knew the route. I had arranged to be away from the city for 3 days. And then I thought about what you had said to Marcus, which was nothing. Which meant you had made the decision to leave based on what you had heard and had not checked whether you were right. And I thought, she did not trust me enough to ask. And I was angry again. Not in the first way. In the second way, which was quieter and harder to put down.
The second kind of angry.
The kind that is also a question. Why did she not trust me enough to ask?
And what did you do with the question?
I sat with it for a long time. And then I understood that trust was not something you either had or did not have. It was something I had or had not made it possible for you to have. And I had not in the specific way you needed.
Which was?
Saying things, not just doing them. You needed to hear things said directly, and I was operating on the assumption that what I did communicated what I intended.
It did not.
It was not enough. For someone whose experience was what yours was, it was not enough to assume the intention was visible.
She looked at him across the table and thought about the conversation she had dreaded and the conversation she was having and the difference between them. The conversation she had dreaded was one in which he would be angry and she would defend, and neither of them would hear the other, and the ending would be something that left marks. The conversation she was having was one in which both of them were trying to understand something real, and it was not comfortable, but it was honest, and she had learned in 8 months of solitude that honesty was more valuable to her than comfort in a way she had not known before.
I should have asked.
Yes.
I am not going to pretend I could have done it differently given who I was at the time and what I believed I had heard, but I should have asked.
I accept that.
And I should have told you about the baby.
Yes.
That one is harder to explain.
You do not have to explain it. I understand the logic of it. If you believed I was leaving, telling me about the baby felt like handing something to someone on their way out the door.
Yes.
That does not make it less hard to have missed.
I know.
But I understand it. And I am not going to spend time on what should have been different. I want to spend it on what happens now.
What does happen now?
That is the question.
Do you have an answer?
I have the start of one, which is that I am here, and I want to be here. And what comes after that I would like to figure out with you in the room.
With me in the room.
I am trying to mean that literally as well as figuratively.
She looked at him. He looked back.
That is more direct than you usually are.
I am trying something new.
The baby moved at that moment, which was the specific kind of thing that happened at the specific moments when the body asserted its priorities over every other consideration, and she put her hand to her side and felt the movement and looked at him, and he was watching her hand and then her face. And she said,
Here.
She took his hand and placed it where hers had been, and he was very still, and she watched his face and saw the thing she had seen in the doorway the previous evening, the thing that was not calculation or management or anything she had a name for, and she thought, that is the real thing. The thing underneath the person he has built over years of running something that required a certain kind of person at its center, and I am one of the very few people who has seen it. He did not say anything. She did not require him to. She left his hand there for a moment, and then she let it go, and picked up her coffee, and he sat back and looked at the table, and the morning continued around them in its ordinary way, and she thought, this is what before looks like, before everything that comes next. 3 days passed in the small house with the baseboard heaters and the plant on the kitchen windowsill, and each day had a slightly different quality from the one before it, the way days did when something was being built incrementally rather than established in a single gesture. Caden moved through the space with the particular consciousness of a person learning a new environment, which was something she had not expected from him and which told her things she had not known. She had thought of him, in the 2 years before the 8 months, as someone who occupied spaces rather than adapted to them, who brought his environment with him rather than joining the one he was in. What she saw in the small house was different. He moved with care. He did not rearrange things to suit himself. He asked before using things that were hers rather than assuming the shared nature of the space. She noticed this and did not comment on it, because commenting on it would have made it into a performance, and it was not a performance. It was simply the way he was choosing to be in her space, and she let it be that without naming it. On the second day, she asked him about the thing he had been planning, not the logistics of it, the proposal that Marcus had been helping him arrange, but the reason behind it, the thing he had been trying to say with the action.
I wanted to give you something permanent, something that said, this is not a situation I am in temporarily. This is a choice I am making with intention.
You could have said that.
I thought doing was better than saying.
I understand that. For most things, doing is better than saying. But for someone who has been watching the people in her life leave for 30 years, saying is the only thing that counts. Doing can be taken back. Words, once said, exist as a thing that was said, even if everything after them changes.
I did not know that about you specifically.
I did not know I needed to tell you.
We were both missing information.
Yes.
I am telling you now what I was trying to say with the thing I was planning.
I know what you were trying to say. I understood it when Marcus explained.
But you have not heard me say it.
No.
I want you to hear me say it.
Then say it.
I was not ending anything. I was trying to make permanent what I had been treating as if it were already permanent in practice, but had not made permanent in any formal way. I was trying to correct that, because I understood that you deserved the correction.
There it is.
Yes.
That was the thing I needed to hear 8 months ago.
I know.
I wish I had heard it then.
So do I.
But I heard it now.
Yes.
That has to count for something.
I believe it does.
The baby came on the 4th day at a time that was neither convenient nor inconvenient, because convenience was not a category that applied to the situation. It came with the specific kind of urgency that required clear thinking, and Vera discovered, in the process of the next several hours, that clear thinking was something Caden was very good at in exactly the kind of situation that was arising. He drove with the focused efficiency she had seen him apply to things he considered important, and he managed the arrival at the hospital with the same efficiency, and he was in the waiting area for 3 hours without her knowing what was happening inside, and when the nurse came to find him, his face in the moment before he composed it for the corridor was the face she had been watching for 4 days in the small house, the face of the person underneath the person who ran things. They gave him a few minutes with her before anything further was decided about anything, and she was lying in the bed in the room that smelled like all hospital rooms and holding the baby, who was very new and very certain of her own presence in the world, despite being less than an hour old. And Caden came to the side of the bed and stood there and looked at the baby and then at Vera, and did not say anything for a moment that was long enough to be its own thing.
Her
hair.
He said it the way you said something you had just learned and wanted to be certain of.
She came a few days early.
She did.
I'm glad you were here.
I am glad I came before she was.
Yes.
Can I?
He made a small gesture toward the baby, asking, and she said,
Yes.
And she watched him take the baby with the careful inexperience of someone who had not held a very new baby before and was applying the most care he had ever applied to anything to the task of doing it correctly, and she thought, there he is again, the real person, and he is holding our daughter, and this is the thing that came out of 8 months of misunderstanding and 30 years of waiting for people to leave, and it is here, and it is more real than anything I have built myself toward in a long time. She said later, when the practical things had been managed and the room was quieter.
I am not going to run before you get a chance to ask.
He looked at her.
The thing you were planning to ask, before all of this. I am not going to leave before you get a chance to ask it.
You know what I was going to ask.
I know enough.
Then you know my answer has not changed.
I know.
But I am still going to ask, not now, not here,
I know that too.
When things are settled,
Yes.
and your answer,
I will give you my answer when you ask it.
fair.
But I will tell you this much. I am not going anywhere in the meantime.
That is more than I had yesterday.
Next time, tell me what you are planning.
Next time, ask me before you conclude.
Deal.
Deal.
She looked at the baby in the bassinet beside the bed, who was asleep with the specific conviction of someone who had made up her mind about sleeping, and she thought, this child will not grow up watching me watch for signs of people leaving, because I am going to learn to ask instead, and that is a thing that costs something but is worth paying, and I know that now. 3 months after the small house in the small town, she and Caden were looking at apartments in the city. Not his apartment, not a rental, but a space they were choosing together, which required more conversations than she had expected and fewer arguments than she had feared. She was standing at the window of the 4th place they had seen, looking at the city in the specific way you looked at a city from a high floor in the early afternoon when the light was good, and Caden was behind her at the table talking to the agent about something practical, and she could hear his voice, the voice she had learned over 2 years and missed over 8 months, and had been learning differently in the 3 since. And she thought, I am not tracking weather. I am not looking for signs. I am standing in a room that is going to be ours, looking at the city that is going to be mine again, listening to the voice of the person I am going to figure the next part out with, and that is what it feels like to not be waiting for someone to leave. It feels like standing at a window. It feels like the light being good. It feels like exactly where I am, which is the only place I need to be. He finished with the agent and came to stand beside her at the window, and he said,
What do you think?
The light is good.
It is.
I think this one.
So do I.
Good.
Yes.
He stood beside her at the window, and the city continued below them, and the baby was with Marcus for the afternoon, and the future was something that had been abstract and was becoming specific. One conversation at a time, one day at a time, one window at a time.
I have something to ask you.
Ask it.
When you were in the 3rd month and you almost came, what stopped you specifically? Not the reason you said, the actual moment.
I was in the car, I had the engine on, and I thought, if she is all right where she is, and she has made a decision that she needs to live with to understand it, then coming would be about what I need, not what she needs. And I was not willing to do that.
She looked at him.
That is the most considerate thing you have ever done.
It cost me.
I know. I am glad you came when you did.
4 days before the end of the last month.
That was very close.
I know.
But you were there.
Yes.
That is the part that counts.
Yes.
She turned back to the window, and they stood in the good light of the 4th apartment, at a height where the city looked like the best version of itself, and she was not tracking anything, and she was not preparing for anything, and the thought that crossed her mind was simple and felt, for the first time in as long as she could remember, entirely true. I am here, and this is where I want to be, and I am not going to leave first. Hết tổng 235 đoạn.